My principle is that I cooperate with people. I let things happen. I go by the environment. This is a quote from Sayombhu Mukdeeprom, a Thai director of photography who's a master of creating visuals grounded in reality, but with a certain element of cinematic beauty and fantasy. In this edition of Cinematography Style, I'm going to be analysing and breaking down the photography of probably my personal favourite contemporary cinematographer by looking at his work and drawing from his philosophy on creating images, as well as looking at the gear he chooses for creating these images. He began his career as a DOP in Thailand, his native country, working with frequent collaborator Apichatpong Weerasettakul, who's nicknamed Joe, and together they've worked on a variety of films, from their first film, Mysterious Object at Noon, a black and white documentary, to a host of films that they've premiered at Cannes, including perhaps the most famous, Uncle Boonmee, Who Can Recall His Past Lives, which won the Palme d'Or at Cannes in 2010. He continued to shoot the majority of his work in Thailand, which included shorts as well as Thai features such as Soi Cowboy and Sawadee Bangkok. Later in his career, Mukdeeprom went on to form a new bond with Italian director Luca Guadagnino, for whom he shot films such as Call Me By Your Name and Suspiria. For his work on Call Me By Your Name, he won an Independent Spirit Award. The success of these films elevated Mukdeeprom's international presence as a DOP and introduced him to a larger audience outside of Thailand. My principle is that I cooperate with people. I let things happen. I go by the environment. Coming back to that first quote, it's clear that Mukdeeprom's visual style comes from how he interacts with the environment on set. Rather than planning out everything to a T in pre-production, he likes to incorporate elements he finds on the set to film the work in a fluid manner. And this extends to his treatment of light. A lot of his lighting is grounded in realism, being clearly motivated by the natural sources that he finds on set. When he was asked about whether he likes to use natural light, Mukdeeprom responded, "That's correct, but also it's still lit in some way. Even though you see that there's really a practical and there's an ambient light, I've always placed the light, supplementing it off screen." So I think, as with most cinematographers, that although the visual style he employs changes depending on the director he's working with, there's a certain commonality to the films that he shoots. I feel that a large part of the base of this look comes from his early days working with Joe. I think it's fitting that their first feature film together was a black and white experimental documentary. It appears to all be shot in 16mm, largely relies on natural light, and features locked off frames on a tripod. His other films with Joe, although more cinematic, are still rooted in this raw, realist visual style. And a lot of that I feel is a head nod to classic Thai television, which is also shot usually on 16mm. Blissfully Yours, Syndromes in a Century, and Uncle Boonmee are shot with a locked off or minimally moving camera. The cinematography never tries to do too much, and the frame is as important as anything in these films. Often the takes are long and extended, and what is in the frame, and more importantly sometimes what is not in the frame, gives it a sense of realism, but also a sense that our point of view is subtly being guided by the filmmakers. The framing often favors wide or medium shots, and rarely gets too close to the characters, favoring a more observational point of view. When working with Guadagnino, the framing also plays an important role. When asked about shot listing, Mukdeeprom insists that he prefers to just follow the screenplay. The text gives us more freedom. Perhaps it's this following of the text that enables the films he shoots to often be cut with the more minimal cutting options than perhaps is standard. His shots tend to get to the point, without having to cut around wildly to 20 different angles to tell a story. Simplicity and naturalism are the foundation of his style. I think a lot of his style can be attributed to his use of more classic gear. He likes to use traditional, large light sources, particularly HMI sources. He favors using fewer sources that are well placed, over filling a set with loads of lights. This allows the directors and actors more freedom to work within the set. He describes on Call Me By Your Name his lighting package and how he ended up with 18K HMIs down to 2.5Ks, an array of cherry pickers, and had to shape the artificial light to appear both natural and sunny. Looking at some behind the scenes photographs, he also seems to be a fan of bouncing light to supplement a more natural look. In terms of camera movement, he also likes to keep the gear pretty traditional. He usually tends to shoot on sticks or off a dolly, using a ride-on crane sometimes, and he usually prefers to operate himself without the use of a stabilized head. He's known for favoring shooting on film, claiming that the medium resonates with him far more than digital. Actually, at the beginning of the era, I dabbled in the digital world and found that I could not use it for the movies. It did not talk to me like film did. It's nothing to do with the medium itself. It's just me. His work with Joe tends to be done on 16mm, while his work with Guadagnino he uses 35mm. He tends to working on the ARRI system, shooting on cameras such as the ARRIFlex 535, ARRICam LT, or an ARRIFlex SR3 for 16mm work. He's recently taken to only using a single film stock, Kodak's Vision 3 500 tungsten stock. He likes to push the stock by one stop, which increases contrast, particularly in the highlights, and increases the film grain, while still keeping it at a manageable level. He prefers not to use any correction filters, even when shooting a tungsten stock in daylight, doing the color correction in post. This can be seen in his work with Guadagnino especially, where the film possesses slightly cool or neutral tones. Lens-wise, he tends to shoot on Cooke or Zeiss glass, although he's shot on a variety of lenses over his career. He's used prime lenses such as the Cooke Speed Pancros or S3s, Cooke S4s, the Zeiss T1.3 Super Speeds, and he sometimes uses zooms such as the Cooke Veritel 18-100 or the commonly used long zoom, the Angenieux Optimo 24-290. On Call Me By Your Name, he took the bold decision to shoot the entire film with one prime lens, a 35mm Cooke S4. Observation was my goal in this film, to try and observe every moment. The Cooke S4 35mm was close enough for the close-ups, and wide enough to frame the characters in relation to one another and in perspective with their surroundings. Overall then with Mukdeeprom, it always comes back to this idea of observation and using the elements occurring naturally on set to create the film, while supplementing these things that occur naturally to create images grounded in a naturalistic, classic style. Guadagnino, discussing the strengths of a cinematographer, sums him up nicely, saying that even though he has a masterful knowledge of cinema from the technical point of view, Sayombhu's priorities are more humanistic than technical. More importantly, he has a masterful knowledge of cinema from the storytelling perspective, the part of the film that has to do with human beings and their emotions. Thanks for watching this first edition of Cinematography Style. If you have any questions, comments or feedback about the video, please let me know in the comments. And also if you have any suggestions for future videos, or if there are any cinematographers you'd like to see featured, just please let me know. And until then, thank you guys and goodbye.